Hi, guys. This is Mr. Shaw once again, and we're going to be talking about how matter moves through the ecosystem. And so, as we are looking at matter and energy, they're a little bit different. We had talked in the last one about energy and that we end up losing energy from one level to the next. There's only about 10% of the energy that's available from one level to the next, and then we end up with the matter. So different things like nutrients and stuff like that are going to get passed on completely. So again, if you were sitting in a classroom and a polar bear bust through the door and ended up eating you, you would laugh at the polar bear because it's only going to get about 10% of your energy. But the polar bear, if it eats all of you, is going to get all of that matter that was a part of you. So when we talk about matter, there's different cycles that we're going to look at, and we've got the water cycle is one of these nutrient cycles, and they're all going to follow sort of a similar pattern. We're going to really focus on just the biological pathways as we go and look at this. So the water cycle. When we talk about the water cycle, there's a little bit different. It's referred to as a hydrological cycle or the water cycle, circular pathway that we're going to end up looking at. And what we see here is some of the different things. So I'm going to point out one. So you're going to end up having evaporation, which is going to be water vapor leaving the surface of bodies of water. Similar to that is going to be transpiration. See a whole bunch of plants over here. That's going to be where water vapor leaves the leaves of plants and goes into the atmosphere. When that water vapor travels up in the atmosphere, it's going to condense and it will form clouds like you see over here. So that would be the condensation aspect. Then when you get so much or so much water built up in the clouds, it's not going to be able to hold it. So it's going to let it go as precipitation. That precipitation is going to fall on the surface of the earth or in a body of water. Falls on a surface of the earth, it's going to be runoff a lot of times and go into bodies of water. If it goes on the earth and it gets absorbed down in through, we refer to that as seepage, and that becomes groundwater when we end up looking at it. And this process will just continue over and over again in that particular area. So when we are looking at the biological pathway, this is for any cycle. So when we're talking about the carbon cycle, talking about the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, um, any of the nutrient cycles that the book talks about, we are again going to focus on the biological pathway. So what the first step of that is going to be is producers are going to take that nutrient and convert it into something that is usable for them. So they're going to make it into something. So plants take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they convert it into sugars. Then we as animals are jerks and we come along, we end up taking that thing that the plant, that producer had made, and we can't make ourselves, and we eat the plant or eat something that has eaten the plant to get what the plant had made. So the consumers are going to be able to get that nutrient that the producers had converted for their own use. The third step is the consumer is going to end up releasing the nutrients as a waste product into the environment. So they may, in our case, with if we're talking about like sugars that we break down, we're going to release carbon dioxide as a waste. And some of the other ones you may end up peeing or pooping out type of a thing. The next step is going to be decomposers. So if you've let go of waste products like pee or poop, or let's say the organism has died altogether, you're going to have decomposers start to work, and they're going to put nutrients back into the soil or back into the atmosphere for the whole thing to start over again. So when we look at the elements essential for life going through these cycles, we look at and we call it a biogeochemical cycle. So if we break down that word biogeochemical, these are the different pathways that nutrients can move through the biosphere, so the world. So you've got the biological, which is the bio, the the geo part is going to be geological, chemical is going to be chemical and physical parts, and then there's another one of those. So that was three. Then we're going to end up looking at the human activities, is going to be the fourth thing that ends up really coming into play. So the main process involved in the oxygen cycle are photosynthesis and respiration, is going to be what we look at for that if we're talking about the biological pathways. Oxygen cycle is going to be going through the ecosystem through the nutrients in various different forms. So the plants take it in or get rid of it as during photosynthesis as a waste product. We take it in, we convert, we make carbon dioxide, and the plants take that in. So that whole process just keeps going over and over again as we are looking at it. So carbon, when we talk about carbon, it's a building block for life. So carbon cycle moves through carbon through the atmosphere, through the food web, returns to the atmosphere. We, with some of those other parts, we will burn fossil fuels. That would be something that human activity is going to do. Some carbon is stored for long times in what we call carbon sinks. So a carbon sink would be like rocks. You could end up having the oceans have a lot of carbon in it. So that's another carbon sink. So right here is just showing multiple ones that are not just the biological pathway right there. So the nitrogen cycle, this one's going to be a little bit different than the other ones when we talk about the biological pathway, because plants can't use nitrogen just straight from the atmosphere. They need something to help convert it for themselves as well. So most of this is going to happen underground. So bacteria is going to convert nitrogen gas into ammonia, and that process is called nitrogen fixation. And then the plants will be able to do all of those steps that we had talked about on the previous slide. So some nitrogen fixing bacteria live on nodules of plants. Uh, Others are freely living in the soil. So this is what we're seeing right here. When the nitrogen gets put back in, we're going to have denitrifying bacteria that are going to put the nitrogen back into the atmosphere, back into the soil to be able to be used again. So ammonia is going to be released into the soil and transformed into ammonium. Nitrifying bacteria take the ammonium and turn it into nitrate and nitrites. Nitrogen is going to move through the food web and return to the soil in decomposition. When we talk about phosphorus, the phosphorus cycle takes place at and below ground. So the phosphate is going to be released by the weathering of rocks. Phosphorus is going to move through the food web and return to the soil again through decomposition. Phosphorus is going to leach into the groundwater from soil and the rocks and sediments in the area. It will be in some of our food that we end up taking in. And again, we will use the phosphorus that we take in from the plants that have made it, and be able to convert it into the things that we need the phosphates for. So the mining and agricultural end up adding phosphorus to the environment when it may not be needed. So again, here's what that ends up looking like. And that is it for these notes.